Hey YouTube, in spirit of all things responsible with responsible spirituality, I wanted to dance in quickly with this wonderful book that I've been reading called Spiritual Bypassing. It's by a guy named Robert Masters, and it's an excellent book when we're thinking about how we might be using spirituality to bypass our emotional needs, our physical needs, when we're kind of leading others down the path of spiritual bypassing. So I wanted to do a 4-card pick a card tarot reading today to basically help us, those of us who are seekers and consider ourselves seekers and spiritual people, to help us look at where we might be bypassing in our lives and when we might be using spirituality to cover up instead of to move forward and embrace all levels of emotion. In spiritual bypassing, we tend to think that, certain emotions are negative and certain emotions are positive. And so we regulate the negative emotions to the lower levels or levels of contraction, where we oftentimes demean others as well for being in a lower vibration. So I really just wanted to hold the space here of spiritual responsibility and read a little bit from this book before I start the reading. And signs of spiritual bypassing are perhaps most commonly seen in minimizing, superficializing, and outright negation of our shadow side, and also called negativity. Other behaviors include taking global or interpersonal stands on clearly personal concerns, as when we might talk about the fact that everything is perfect, all unfolding exactly as it must, while we are talking to another in a demeaning way. Or in response to someone's suffering, we may say, it's all an illusion, including your suffering, or it's just your ego, delivering one-liners with minimal feeling, much like newscasters reporting both the shallow and deeply tragic in the very same professionally modulated tone of voice. So that's one way that we might engage in spiritual bypassing. There are many ways to engage in spiritual bypassing, but I wanted us to take a look here at these cards I have, the 4 piles I have laid out here, and you can pick which one resonates with you. The first one here, pile number 1, is the amethyst. Pile number 2 here is this beautiful blue stone. Pile number 3 here is a cool rock that my friend gave me, and pile number 4 is the yellow jasper crystal. So pick 1, 2, 3, or 4, and we'll dive into your specific patterns, which may include spiritual bypassing, i.e. what gets in the way of your true spirituality. So with that being said, we'll move. I pre-shuffled all the cards. I don't have any idea what lies under these cards, much like I can feel like with our shadow sometimes we have no idea what is underlying. So let's look with the amethyst here, and until we face it. And so let's look. Okay, so for pile number 1, we have the King of Pentacles. We have 2 kings, we have the Queen of Swords, and we have the 9 of Wands. So right off the bat, I'm going to say a challenge for you with spiritual bypassing is going to be feeling like you always have to know the right answer, that you have no room to be a beginner at any place in your life, that you need to be extremely well informed. And with the Queen of Swords here, you have to be extremely well informed, and you have to have your resources, King of Pentacles, and your emotions constantly in check all the time. And you have to be ready and well-read and well-researched here with the Queen of Swords. Also with the Queen of Swords and 9 of Wands here, I'm seeing the defensive patterns that you may engage in here to keep others at a distance. And that's also part of spiritual bypassing, where we keep others at a distance in order to protect ourselves and kind of hold ourselves up on the throne, right? We want to be seen as having it together, King of Pentacles, and we want to be seen as emotionally having it together and not, having any emotional issues. In this deck, the king himself is actually, or herself, is actually missing from the picture here. And you can see that we kind of have abandoned ourselves in pursuit of, what we deem to be the highest knowledge and the best knowledge, instead of sort of sitting in our own truths and, kind of following the edicts of others, where we may have literally abandoned ourselves, also as a way of spiritual bypassing and numbing out the pain. So and that's particularly true here with this version of the Nine of Wands, where she's kind of, she's sort of bent over and she's covering her face a little bit. So you can see there might be some self-abandonment here that's happening too. So I see the need to kind of always be, not in a way, I'm not getting the feeling that this, that you want to be because I see the moon here, this lovely moon here, and the King of Cups. So I know that you want to take care of others and help others. But I see that you feel like you have to have everything 100% figured out and nailed down before you really can proceed upon any kind of a spiritual path, or that you might be obsessed with always having the right answer. So for those of you that took pile number 1, my advice is, some of these defenses that we build up to keep others out, of course, are rooted in our wounds. And we don't really have to, show up with all the answers and completely prepared to the nines, sometimes to the nines, Nine of Wands, completely prepared and dressed and accounted for to the nines. Sometimes we can just show up as we are, and we don't have to have all the answers. On the other hand, this spread is showing that you do have a considerable amount of mastery in the spiritual world. We have the Queen of Wands, you're not taking any shit. The King of Cups, you are in charge of your emotions. The King of Pentacles, you know how to direct your resources. But the Nine of Wands here is saying there's been some sort of defensive pattern that's been built up in the past with this. So it's all about learning to break down those defensive patterns. So pile number 1, that's your quick reading on spiritual bypassing. Now on to pile number 2, which was this beautiful blue stone. I don't even know what it is. I just found it the other day after I moved. This beautiful blue stone. Okay, so let's look at that. Pile number 2. Ooh. So we have 2 5s and 2 2s. So what I'm seeing here is really how we can get out of balance with others. We might come into spiritual bypassing when we're around others who don't really support our growth and who can shame us and make us feel less than. So in spiritual bypassing, we talk about shame essentially, and I'm seeing this with the blue, the 2 of Wands here, and the 5 of Wands, and this yellow color. I'm definitely seeing here the solar plexus, and then the blue with the communication and the throat chakra. So I'm seeing how being around others and in the energy of others is sometimes very hard to hold and maintain. And there's so much going on around you that it feels like there's so many possibilities and everybody would like to have their say in what's happening. So there might be a lot of self-censoring here with pile number 2, where we feel like we have to censor ourselves and we have to basically fit into what's happening around us. And that might cause us to go through a lot of bypassing as well. Where we kind of depend on, here with the 2 of Cups, we see how, water is going from one cup to the other cup, and where we feel like we need to have somebody else across from us to do our work. So there might be some codependency here too with the fives and the twos here with the Two of Wands. Although I will say here with the Two of Wands, this is the first card in this series where she's actually alone. And these other cards, she has other people around her. And the other people around her are not exactly, they might not exactly be completely supportive of this person's healing. I think there's also the tendency to feel like better times are always ahead, right? With this Five of Cups, we have this woman is looking down at the ground and then the angel is pointing at her. So it's this sense that, right now on the earth plane, everything is hard and horrible. But once we leave the earth plane, everything is going to be great and wonderful. But everything is just hardship while we're here. And so I think I really see this sequence of cards here as the way that we're spiritually bypassing here is to think that there's always going to be, it's like that feeling when you say, well, this lifetime hasn't been great for me, but I know I'll get all my riches and all my rewards in heaven, right? And always just kind of disassociating. With the Five of Cups here, there could be also some disassociation going on. When we disassociate, we disconnect from the here and now, and we put ourselves forward into the future or back into the past, and so we're not really living in the present. Now, I will say with the Two of Wands here, this is nothing like, this is living in the present. This is actually stepping off on your own and going in the direction that you want to go. And so for pile number twos, I will say that as much chaos and as you have around you with others, with the Five of Wands and trying to influence you, and as much as kind of your own, like this will be better sometime, different sometime now, there is tremendous ability with the twos here for you to enjoy the presence of others and also to just go off on your own and do your own thing, and with the Two of Wands here, and not really care what everyone else is doing. So that is my message for pile number two. Pile number three was this beautiful rock that my friend gave me. So lovely. I think it was on a trip to Chicago. So let's look at pile number three in spiritual bypassing or spiritual challenges. Okay. Already from the first gate out the door, we have the Guide, which is actually the Hierophant in like the Rider-Waite, and the Nine of Swords. Already out the gate, I'm seeing that there may have been a very harsh internal judge that is saying you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, and kind of letting the internal judge and the internal critic have complete control over the conversation. With the Hierophant and the Nine of Wands, you have probably also experienced those around you who have really tried to control you and really tried to influence your opinions. And so here with the Nine of Swords, you see her kind of with, pushing the dust out of her eyes and sort of, getting the sleep out of the corner of her eyes. And it could be where, you have kind of maybe somewhat blindly followed others' opinions, values, and beliefs. And so this is really showing you that you really don't have to do that. And the time now is to wake up. So we've got the Judgment card with the clock on it. So the time is now, huge awakening, right? And then a huge self-love. So we don't have to follow what others have set out for us and follow any kind of internalized dialogue that others have put upon us. we can get rid of that. We can embrace ourself and our self-love, and we can, say time's up. On the Judgment card here, time's up. I'm not going to be held hostage to anybody else's beliefs or traditions, and I'm certainly not going to let the internal judge come in and just crap all over myself and my ideas. And so I think where we get into some spiritual bypassing here is where we abdicate our own authority and we just let the spiritual we let the judgmental part of ourselves run rampant in our head. And that might be because we had some very tough experiences with religion earlier on in life. And so I think, the Judgment card is really saying time to wake up from that. And we can only use our past as excuse for so long, right? There might be a tendency to be pretty harsh with yourself too, in the sense that, why isn't this done yet? Why hasn't this sped up yet? And so with the Hierophant, we're really invited to slow things down as well. Okay, that's pile number 3. And pile number 4 is the yellow jasper stone here. So the yellow jasper stone is for the solar plexus, and this is for spiritual bypassing tendencies, pile number 4. Okay, Knight of Wands and 3 of Wands, and then the 2 of Swords and the Knight of Swords. So speaking of going too quickly, these the Knight of Swords particularly and the King of Wands are going pretty quickly here. And I think there's also a tendency with pile number 4 here to look at the bright side and the sunny side and be very enthusiastic about what it is that you're doing, to the point of, it almost blinds you in a sense. You're so excited and happy about what's going, which is great. It's awesome to have enthusiasm and be really directed that way. But it feels like that there's almost too much positivity. It's like when we think that, when the worst thing happens to us and we're like, oh, I can't possibly have a bad day. I can't possibly, everything is great. Everything is wonderful, right? And then you can see here with the Knight of Swords, look at his eyes right there. His eyes look pretty sad and worried, right? And so I think there may be this internal struggle with basically putting a positive spin on everything and looking at everything as an optimistic undertaking. And so, not everything is optimistic. And, when we don't really acknowledge our pain and what we've been through, and we just have to be positive, even though the world around us might be burning, and we just have to always be super chipper and happy and just moving on. We're not really allowing ourselves. And even if you see here this Knight of Wands, he's like the Tin Man in the Wizard of Oz in a way, where it's like the eyes are sad here, but there's not a lot of emotional penetration. And so I think with this, if we don't acknowledge that the world isn't perfect and that we're having a bad day and that positivity isn't, the end all be all of everything, it can start to really weigh on us and be very depressing, in a way, and feel very heavy and depressive. So normally I wouldn't, call the Knight of Swords a depressive card, because the Knight of Swords is always going really, really fast and speaking really quickly. But in this case, if we don't stop and acknowledge how we're feeling, and just everything's, hunky-dory, even though the world is kind of burning behind us, or in front of us, actually burning in front of us, you know, that's a very easy way to spiritually bypass too. And so I think the trick for you, or the takeaway here for you, pile number 4, is not to let everything just be positive and wonderful all the time. Sometimes things are definitely going to be hard, and that's okay. It's okay to show that. So thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video. More videos to come soon. Thank you.